What is up, guys? This is Working Flop, and today I'm coming at you with another video, but this is going to be a new series I'm going to be starting, and I'm going to start doing IndyCar race reviews now, and this video is going to be my first IndyCar race review for me. I've been watching IndyCar since 2017, and I've really gotten into IndyCar as it's been growing as a sport and motorsport as a whole. Sorry if the lighting's crappy again, that's just the way it is. So if you're seeing like one side pale, one side dark, I look like a freaking moon. Who cares? But for this race overall for IndyCar, this is like I said, this is my first race review. So if I miss things, comment below what I missed. But wow, I'm just gonna say this right now. Even though my favorite driver Joseph Newgarden didn't win, this race was 10 million times better than the Cup race, and there was good battling. There were tight, close battles all around the track, and I think that's what made this race entertaining, at least for me. Not the wrecks that I'll talk about later, but I think the overall racing aspect and battling and drama between Pagenaud and Wickens is what made it interesting. But let's get on to the review. So the race starts, and Newgarden and Dixon are starting up front, and Will Power does a Helio Castroneves from last year. Dives all the way, makes it 3 wide in the first corner. He got into third, I think, but then he ended up getting passed by Ryan Hunter-Reay. And there was some, intense battles going on. A little bit of contact with Hinchcliffe and Wickens, the two Canadians. I'll talk about Wickens later on in the video. They had some tire-on-tire contact in the first lap getting out of turn 2. Overall, it was really exciting. People were shuffling up and down through the race, and ultimately it was Newgarden, Dixon, and Hunter-Reay that were the top 3. It's felt like Newgarden had a really good car throughout most of the race, but he made a mistake that, again, I'll talk about later on. But Newgarden had the fastest lap for, I'd say, about 17 to 30 laps until we get our first caution, which is brought out by, actually, no, I'm going to get to that later. Sorry, like I said, this is my first time doing an IndyCar review. I'm a little rusty. But, as the run goes on, the first incident happens where Sebastian Bourdais loses side of his wing, his rear wing. It flies over the fence, but no one was there, so it was okay. But it flies over the fence. He loses part of his wing. Going into turn 1, he spins out, almost backed up into Hinchcliffe, I think is who he almost backed into. It was either him or Kimball. I don't remember exactly. But he backed up, almost hit them. He spun out, continued on with his race. It seemed like Bourdais had kind of one of the worst cars today. I expected more of Bourdais, considering he won St. Petersburg. He's been sort of consistent with the street road courses, so I expected more out of Robert Wickens, but ultimately we didn't see that out of him. Or not Robert Wickens, Sebastian Bourdais, I'm sorry. So he spun out. He kind of had a mediocre day throughout the whole race. So Bourdais spun out, and then we get our first caution in the race, which shook up what was going on, and it was Jordan King and Graham Rahal that were up front at the time than Newgarden and Dixon, because Jordan King and Rahal, they were on a different strategy. They were going to try to stay out as long as they can until they got a caution to get new tires, and ultimately try to work their way up through the field and past the leaders, which it worked out for them, but they didn't have fast enough cars to get up there. But the reason for the first caution was because Ryan Hunter-Reay in turn 3 hit the wall head-on to the tire barriers, and he lost a part of his front wing, and Alexander Rossi at the same time hit the back of Will Power, messed up his whole front wing as well. So Rossi kind of had a mediocre day ever since then. They had to... Actually, I think from what I saw in the race, they had to keep repairing front wings for Alexander Rossi, considering that he damaged 2 throughout the race. I'll get to the other one later. But, yeah, they had to keep repairing wings, so they didn't have enough to, keep giving to Rossi. So, I guess you can't do much there. But Rossi, yeah, again, mediocre day. Same with Ryan Hunter-Reay. He was third at the beginning of the race. He had a decent car, but, you mess up once, you mess up the whole race. So... that's just how IndyCar is, and you got to move on from that. And Power suffered a little bit of damage as he went under caution, as he pitted under caution. He had to fix the rear wing a little bit. I think there was something wrong with the suspension as well. He lost a lot of track position. Rossi and Hunter-Reay ended up getting through him on pit road during that caution. So, yeah, that happened. And we restart now, and for some reason, Joseph Newgarden, who had the fastest car throughout the whole race, but actually I think before the caution came out, Dixon ended up getting the faster lap, and he was getting close to Newgarden because Ed Jones kept holding off Newgarden before. I don't know why Ed Jones was doing that, but I think it was just a team play strategy for Chip Ganassi Racing. So I guess you can't really do anything about that. But so as the race goes on, we restart. Newgarden gets into the marbles, hits the outside wall. I was furious. I was upset because now I knew Dixon was going to run away with the win, and Newgarden was going to fall back in points a little bit. Just a little bit, though. But, yeah, Newgarden gets in the marbles, hits the wall, slows down. Robert Wickens goes all the way up to second, and Marco Andretti gets a good restart all the way up there. And then we have the big one happen that involved Graham Rahal, Ed Jones, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Alexander Rossi, Will Power, and I think Piggott was in it a little bit. I don't remember exactly. Oh, yeah, no, Bourdais was in it as well. But, yeah, so basically I think Power, Rahal drove it in too deep. He hit the back of, I think, Pagano. I forgot who it was. Maybe it was Kimball. But he hit the back of someone, and then Veach got into his rear, turned Rahal around. Hunter-Reay collided with him, and as Hunter-Reay collided with Rahal, I believe it was... No. Jesus, I am all messed up today. I'm sorry. So Rahal spun out. Rossi hit Rahal, and then Hunter-Reay came in from behind Rahal. His left front tire clipped Rossi's right rear tire, and it launched Rossi into the air, and his whole back end was in the air for about 1.5 seconds. I don't need to be exact, but at least 2 seconds at most. But Rossi was in the air. He came back down on all fours. That was nuts. And then a Power slammed the Honda tire barrier. Same with, and Bourdais just got caught up by being slowed down. I think he hit Hunter-Reay, and Piggott hit the tire barrier as well. It was just a crazy big wreck. Really, Power just was having a bad race overall, so he couldn't really do much. Sucks for Rossi and Hunter-Reay. I thought they had a shot to win. I felt like maybe Rossi had a longer run car that could contend with Dixon and Newgarden, but ultimately he didn't really have the car that I was hoping he would. But then again, I want Newgarden to win because Newgarden's my favorite, and I'm a biased fan. So yeah. So that wreck happened, and then we restart again. Dixon gets a great jump off the restart. Wickens behind Dixon didn't do anything much. He just kind of sat in second. Pagano was there as well. And then Renee Binder spins out, I believe, and then his car stalled, and we got another caution. And that really changed up the game a little bit, I would say. So, and then we go green again. Scott Dixon takes off, and Wickens and Pagano are left back. As we go through the green flag run, shoot, what happened? Wickens decided to pit early, considering he didn't want to risk it too much. And Pagano pitted a little bit later than Wickens. And Wickens, what him and his crew chief, I think, thought was that if they pitted early, they could, on the pit cycle, they would have the warmer tires and get around Simon Pagano, who would be on colder, fresh, new tires. So I think that was their thought process going into that pit cycle strategy. So it almost worked, but ultimately Dixon had, he was pitted later than Wickens, and he had a great pit stop, and he already had a huge lead over Wickens even before the pit cycle started. So ultimately Dixon was going to stay in front of Wickens, and it wasn't as close as we thought it would be with Wickens' strategy. But then Pagano pitted late. He got out ahead of Robert Wickens. Wickens was on hotter tires and used up tires a little bit, and Pagano was on cold, new, fresh tires. And Wickens was right on Pagano as well. He actually hit the rear wing and bumper of Pagano, moved him a little bit, got a good run out of two, charged him down the backstretch, went to the high side, And into turn 3, Simon Pagenaud puts Robert Wickens in the wall, but does not wreck him. Wickens, obviously, we heard he was frustrated over the radio. At first when I looked at it, I thought Pagenaud made a dirty move, but now that I think of it, he didn't wreck Wickens, and Wickens still held his ground in third place at least. So, I guess you can't. It's a racing deal. You can't do much about that. IndyCar didn't see it as wrong because Wickens, again, he held his position, so you can't blame Pagenaud too much for that. And actually, Pagenaud, after doing that, was gaining on Scott Dixon because Ryan Hunter-Reay I believe he was a lap down, and I think he was trying to just stay ahead of Dixon so he could get maybe a caution. They were banking on a caution so they could get their lap back and get newer tires and try to make a charge towards the front. So, but ultimately Hunter-Reay had to pit, and Pagenaud, I'd say, with about 1.5 second, he was 1.5 seconds back from Dixon when Ryan Hunter-Reay pitted, and then obviously with Dixon being in the clean air and having the lead, he was able to get pull away from Simon Pagenaud, and that's about it. And then later on in the run, nothing much was happening. Takuma Sato creamed the wall, and kind of like Newgarden did earlier, but he hit the wall extremely hard. He ended up not finishing the race. He DNF'd. Really sucked for Sato. I thought he had a top 10 running car, and he did. Especially on the restart, it seemed like he really had the speed and the jump over everyone else. And maybe if he got the second, maybe he would have overtaken Scott Dixon. I don't know. He definitely had a short run car. He was able to pass Rossi and Hunter-Reay for a little bit, I noticed, and kind of Newgarden later in the run. But again, he hit the wall. His day was done. Nothing more can be said. And right when Newgarden was moving up through the field, Spencer Pigot hits the wall the same way Newgarden did and Sato did. So I think, that last turn before, getting to the start-finish line, if you get in those marbles, you are done. There's no grip. There's no traction. You can't really do anything with the car at that point. That just happens, It's how Toronto is. It's how street racing is. So Pigot hits the wall. There's nothing you can do about that. But I thought, Pigot was going to get to the point where he was going to slow up so much that they were going to call a full-course yellow, but they didn't. They didn't do it for Sato either because Sato pulled off and was off the track before they could even throw it. So, no caution. Scott Dixon ended up running away and winning at Toronto. So, good for Scott Dixon. Ultimately, Scott Dixon's a 4-time IndyCar champion. He's a good veteran driver. He's got a 62-point lead over Joseph Newgarden, who is in second in points. Hopefully, my boy Newgarden does it at Mid-Ohio and closes that points lead on Scott Dixon and can ultimately get his second championship in a row. I definitely give this race a 9 out of 10 because of the racing, the strategy, and the battling that we saw throughout the whole race. I really thought it was entertaining, at least for me to watch. Even though Newgarden didn't win and he choked up by hitting the wall, of course I was upset about that, but ultimately I think the racing was great. I give it a 9 out of 10. Newgarden ended up finishing 9th, so he kind of worked his way up through hitting the wall, so at least he got a top 10, So ultimately, great race, 9 out of 10. Newgarden got a top 10, so that always makes me happy. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a battle between Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden for the championship. So considering we have 5 races left of the season, we got Mid-Ohio, Pocono, Gateway, Portland, and Sonoma. So it's going to come down to a 5-race shootout. Whoever's got the best car in the end, I think, will win the championship and shorten that gap to Scott Dixon. He's got a 62-point lead over Newgarden, 70-point lead over Ryan Hunter-Reay, and he's got, I think a 91-point lead over Alexander Rossi. I think I take Will Power out of the equation. He had a horrible day today. Power, he wasn't strong like Newgarden and Pagenaud were towards the end. I don't know. Power's just had so much bad luck throughout. Even though he won the Indy 500, Power just didn't seem like he's been able to have the strength that I think he would wish he had. So, sucks for Power. I hope he gets better. Maybe he can be a threat for the championship later on this season. But it seems like this happens to every Indy 500 winner where, they win and they focus on that a little bit too much and then forget about the ultimate goal at the end of this season. So, which is to win the championship at Sonoma. So, maybe we'll see more out of Power this season. I don't know. Or maybe his bad luck will continue. One of those two. Podium finishers, obviously, Scott Dixon won the race. Simon Pagenaud got second. And Robert Wickens, the Canadian, got third. And he is on the podium. So, it's good to see a Canadian win at, or not win, but get on podium at Toronto, considering it's their home track, technically, and home country. So, good for Robert Wickens to get on podium. I've always liked Robert Wickens, especially since St. Petersburg. I always thought he had a lot of potential. Him and James Hinchcliffe, they kind of respected each other, especially after Robert Wickens got on podium. He was really classy towards Simon Pagenaud. They didn't have any problems, even though I thought Wiggins was going to do something to Pagenaud post-race, considering what he sounded like on the radio, what NBC showed. So, good for Wiggins, good for Pagenaud getting second on podium, even though, again, Pagenaud's not going to be a contention for the championship, but it definitely leaves Pagenaud with a positive note. Dixon, again, wins at Toronto, extends that point lead against Newgarden, Rossi, and Hunter Ray. So, that's about it. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is, it was Marco Andretti, who was fourth. He absolutely drove on the restarts. I know, Marco Andretti he's kind of debatable when it comes to his talent and ability to drive, holding the Andretti last name. But I feel like Marco had a good car, but apparently they had a miscommunication on strategy. And Andretti didn't have enough fuel at the end of the race, so he had to come to pit road on the with 2 to go or the final lap, one of those two. And he ultimately finished 10th. He could have had a fourth place, top 5 finish, but sucks for Marco Andretti. I think Marco is getting better as we go on. So good. Ultimately Marco had a strong run today. Same with Newgarden, even though Newgarden finished 9th. Marco got a 10th place finish. You at least just be happy you got top 10. So I know it sucks to not have a top 5, and you could have finished 4th, but I think you have to take more of the positive side on what happened. So that's about it. Charlie Kimball finished 5th. That was pretty cool, considering I always kind of thought he wrecked a lot, but I think that's his career best finish. I don't exactly remember, but good for Kimball. I think Max Chilton finished last. Max Chilton was the other person involved in that big one with Ray Hollandham. So Chilton finished last, kind of becoming a washed-up driver, if you ask me. I don't really see much in Max Chilton. Connor Daly, I think, performed decent for, coming back and taking Gabby Chavez's ride, but yeah, so ultimately, 9 out of 10 race. Newgarden got a top 10. The racing was great. The battles were good. And watch more IndyCar, NASCAR fans. Even though I was happy Truex won last night, the racing sucked. NASCAR sucks now. Please watch more IndyCar. I'll continue to make these reviews. Maybe I'll start doing IMSA race reviews. I'll maybe start that, You never know. So, congrats, Scott Dixon. Hopefully Newgarden can shorten that gap at Mid-Ohio, because I know he won there last year. So, let's go Newgarden. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.